If you're someone who writes custom code for Squarespace sites and you've ever run into a situation where you write some code and then Squarespace makes a change that breaks your code, you know the pain of then having to go and figure out what the update was that broke it and then update your code. Well, Squarespace has listened to us in the developer community. We have been asking them to compile a list of stable selectors that we can use that we know will never change in the future. And to their credit, they have listened to us and they've begun compiling this list of stable selectors. So that's what I want to cover with you in today's video. So because this is brand new, it's a pretty short list, but I just want to kind of go over how they're sort of laying it out for us to follow. So basically they have these HTML attributes, and I'll have a link to this developer documentation in the link below this video. But basically you just go to developers.squarespace.com and then you can go to custom code, and it has a little overview of the new specification. And then you click on HTML attributes and it'll take you to this page. So the first sort of stable selector that they've called out here is just the section ID. And basically this is the new feature to where you can add IDs to sections. And primarily people use this for anchor links. So if we edit the section and then scroll down, we can add, we'll say name. This will be the ID of this section. And as I mentioned, people generally use this to have an anchor link scroll to this section, but all it's doing is just adding an ID to the section. And so Squarespace is calling out that you can use this ID to target this section if you wanted to. So we can see it there. So that's the first sort of stable selector. When you add an ID to a section, there's no risk that Squarespace would ever change that ID or override it. So this is our first stable selector. Next, Squarespace is identifying different block types with an attribute of data-sqsp-block equals and then the type of block. And right now they only have these 6 blocks supported with this data attribute, but I'm sure they will be growing this list as time goes on. So right now they have these different block types identified. So we can look at the text block first here. We won't look at all of them. We'll just look at a couple of them. And basically on the outermost sort of wrapper of this HTML block. So I am used to historically using the HTML-block class to target text blocks, but now they want us to use this attribute that we can see here. So data-sqsp-block equals text. And so with classes, we target those with a period, but with attributes, we use brackets. So if I wanted to target this text block, I'm no longer going to use that class. Instead, I'm going to open up some brackets and paste that in there. And this is now how I could target text inside of a text block. So let's say I wanted to target an H1 inside of all of my text blocks. I can now write some CSS here, and it's not going to affect any other H1s on the site. Like for example, blog post titles are also H1s. So if I didn't want to affect those, I only wanted to affect H1s inside of text blocks, this would be a good way to do that. On all the other block types, so for the button block, you'll see it as well. We'll go to that kind of outermost container, data-sqsp-block equals button, etc. for all the other blocks. So this is going to be our first stable selector. And just remember, with attributes, we're going to use brackets to target them. So next we have on the actual link, so this is the link inside of the button, we have this data-sqsp-button element as well. So this is another attribute, and we can see that here, data-sqsp-button. So to target the button block, we are going to use this, but that doesn't do us much good because all of the styling for the button is actually on the link itself. So if we scroll down here, the padding is set on the link element, the font size, all of the colors too. So if we scroll down, the text color, the background color, the border color, all of these things are defined on the actual link itself. So if we want to change any of those things with CSS, we're going to be using this attribute. And again, to target button links themselves, we would use brackets like that. Next, for text blocks, so they have a data attribute which is basically the container that isn't enclosing the actual text itself. So in case for some reason you might, want to target the parent of all of the actual text content in here, then you're going to be using this attribute right here. So I was trying to think of like, what are the reasons why we might target the parent? And one thing I can think of is maybe using Flexbox could be really handy. So Flexbox allows us to put content next to each other essentially. So if I move this down, and we'll just create more room in this container here. So let's say I have like paragraph text is here that I want next to heading. So we could have this be in a separate text block and then put it next to the heading, but using Flexbox gives us a little bit more control. So one example that I can think of that would work is we could target that parent element and then give it a display of flex by inspect. So I'll target this data attribute right here, which is the parent of my H1 and my paragraph. And again, it's an attribute. So I'm going to open up some brackets, open up some curly brackets, and now I can say display flex. And then these two things are going to go next to each other. And maybe I want to add a little bit of gap. So we have a little bit more control over like how the content lives inside of this text block. So that could be an option. And this is going to be the way that we do that. Now, right now I'm targeting all text blocks on the site, which obviously isn't ideal. So if I wanted to limit it, I think the block IDs are going to be pretty stable as well. So we could use the block-UE to target this block ID. Of course, you can't use just normal UEs because those are dynamic. So I couldn't do anything that starts with UE, but if it starts with block-UE, that's totally fine. So I can limit the CSS to just this text block by targeting this ID, and we target IDs with a hashtag in CSS. So I could limit my CSS just to this text block this way, or because this is the only text in this section, I could also just use the ID that we looked at earlier. So this section has an ID of name. So I could limit this CSS to only this text block content that's inside of this section. So then if I added like another text block here, now it's interesting, it looks like it doesn't apply in edit mode, only when you save the page. So something to keep in mind there. And there we go. So this is applying to all of the text block contents inside of this section. So because I duplicated that text, it's also applying to this one. If I had multiple text blocks in this section and I only wanted it to apply to the first one, for example, then I would use the block ID. The image block, it has this data attribute on it in case you want to like target, this particular element. And then the image itself has this data attribute on it in case you want to make any changes to the image element with CSS, and same for the link. It has this data attribute. So, and then finally the data sqsp-shape-block-shape is going to be the way that you target the actual like SVG itself in case you want to make any changes with CSS to that. So I'm not going to go over all the examples, but hopefully that sort of illustrates that we're really switching from classes in CSS targeting to now attributes when targeting elements in Squarespace. So we're going to be using the brackets much more, targeting these stable selectors. And I'm sure that Squarespace will be adding to this list, and it's going to be much, much bigger and more comprehensive and give us a much better blueprint on how to target certain elements. So I really think you should keep an eye on this document, favorite it, keep it in your browser, and just kind of check back. I'm going to be keeping an eye on it too. And I'll be sure to be using the best practices in all of my tutorials to be using the stable selectors when possible. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked it and are interested in seeing more Squarespace customization content like this in the future, please consider subscribing, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.